I'm perplexed as hell about Trump's conduct, which seems completely insane. In fact, it seems so completely insane, irredeemably way out there, one flew over the cuckoo's nest insane, that I can't even believe that somebody could be that insane.
I think we've all been propagandized by the Russians, by the Iranians, by the Israelis, by the British, by the French, by the Americans, by the neocons, by everybody. And our view of what this conflict is actually about has been polluted with all of that gaslighting and propaganda. The scenario is now starting to look like they want to install Davos's preferred guy in Iran, which is the return of the Shah. They're betraying their own people as well as everybody else. That's a harder narrative to accept, but it may actually be true.
Yes,
and because it actually furthers their fucking evil goddamn plans.
And so Iran is in the right to defend themselves, because maybe they will become like the Congolese. They're going to become slaves to the Western Empire.
Yep.
And the Brits and the French are dead set on regaining their colonial dominance over the Middle East, over Africa, over South Asia. They want Russia, they want Ukraine, they want Eastern Europe, they want South America, all of it.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
Tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make-war-history and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK. bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make-war-history. And let's make war history. Stay ahead of the curve by signing up as one of Tom Luongo's Patreons and become a part of his investment community and get his investment letter.
It's that freaking big.
You can keep up with Alex Krainer's extraordinary analysis and writing at his Substack and also make money using his trend following strategy. To find out more, go to bit.ly/cryptorichalexk. bit.ly/cryptorichalexk. Hey Tom, hey Alex. Okay, let's get to it. There's too much going on. Take it away, one of you.
Alex, you start, man. I've been waiting to hear your take on what you think is going on for days now. So,
hi, Rich. Hi, Tom. Good to join you guys today. Lots to talk about, isn't there? I would start with a question.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll start with a question for Mr. Tom Luongo, because I expect that you will have a better insight into this. But I'm perplexed as hell about Trump's conduct, which seems completely insane. In fact, it seems so completely insane, irredeemably way out there, one flew over the cuckoo's nest insane, that I can't even believe that somebody could be that insane. So I'm thinking he's doing something. And I can figure out what he's doing, but I have like a hunch. And so the big beautiful bill is meant to go through Congress. What on the 4th of July or just before on the 3rd of July? I don't know. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Do you think that his playing the I'm a uber Zionist game to get that bill passed, and then he's going to do a 360 or maybe a 180?
I think that's part of it. I'm not going to argue. Thursday night, I was on the phone with Larry Johnson for while the initial attack was going on. I was on the phone with Larry for 2 hours after he had just gotten off the plane from Moscow. Okay, and where he talked with Lavrov and he talked with some other people and whatnot. And at that point, Larry was stunned and I was stunned, and that was Thursday night, and we were all like really freaked out. And I'm sure you guys saw the tweet that I put out Thursday night, which said, in 48 hours, the world we thought that we knew would be unrecognizable. And I did not mean nuclear weapons. I never meant that at all. I meant our idea, a conception about how our model about what we thought about the world would be completely different. And I said it, and I wrote it right at a moment where I was having the hardest time trying to figure out where things were going to go from here, because they could easily spiral in 100 different directions, and I didn't have a handle at all on what was going on. That was Thursday night. And then Friday morning, I saw a note that said Lindsey Graham had just let the big beautiful bill out of committee where he was holding up both ICE funding and border security. And I'm like, okay, that's piece number one. That was important. Trump does have a traitorous faction in the Senate. What I've come to realize, or this is my current version of the way I think things work. And what I'm about to say is probably, I know Rich, you've heard part of this. The problem is, Alex, you haven't heard any of this yet. So, because you've been as busy as everybody else has, which is, I believe that Netanyahu is, nothing I'm about to say is going to say that my attitude towards Israel has changed, which is that I think I hate them. I always have. Okay. I hate what they've done in Gaza. Hate how they've treated the United States. I hate how they've treated everybody. And mostly, I've hated how the Israeli government has treated the Israeli people. Right. Remember that my fundamental argument has always been that there's a framework of potential for a grand bargain in the Middle East, and it's Trump and Putin that are the key players in this, and they are beset on and everybody is beset on all sides by people attempting to make them do things that they do not want to do. So I don't think Trump is lying that he doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, because I don't think he wants anybody to have a nuclear weapon. I think Netanyahu doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and I think they have different reasons as to why they might not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So to me, the big question is, who holds whose leash? And if you listen to all of the people that are out in force in every venue at a level that I have not seen since the propaganda that started on 10/8, before Israel even responded to 10/7, what do I see? That Trump has betrayed MAGA, that Trump has done this. Larry Johnson was screaming at me that Trump could have stopped this if he wanted to. But I'm like, yeah, he could have. So maybe there's a reason why he didn't. And it's not just about domestic politics. It's about that this just needs to happen, that this is the precursor. This is the first thing that has to happen in order to start the process towards a grand bargain in the Middle East. So now that I've said that, I'm going to tell you what my preferred outcome is. And I think once I say it, Alex, you're going to be like, okay, Tom hasn't lost his mind. I'm hoping for a tie and a lot of injuries. Meaning I want Iran to be punched in the mouth an awful lot, and I want the Israelis to be punched in the mouth an awful lot. And then I want them to both to go, oh, yeah, we can't do this anymore. They are both, I think, and I still think they are both pawns in a much larger game. Okay, and the question is who maps to whom? And one of the things that I've been considering, and the more I study this, I really start to think about this. And no matter what you might think about Israel, they may be the only ones here who can actually do what needs to be done. I think we've all been propagandized by the Russians, by the Iranians, by the Israelis, by the British, by the French, by the Americans, by the neocons, by everybody. And our view of what this conflict is actually about has been polluted with all of that gaslighting and propaganda. Because of that, some of us, including myself, have missed the mark at times. So what I'm about to say is probably going to rankle a lot of people, but the more I've had a chance to present this argument, okay, the more sense it makes to me, which is that the world changed when Obama got the JCPOA signed. Okay? And what I mean by that is the history of Israel's relationship with the United States and Britain and Europe was one thing. And you and I, Alex, have done unbelievable work over the years to explain that story. The Balfour Declaration, Sykes-Picot, this, that, World War I, World War II, all of this stuff. Everything that's happened. Except that here's the problem. What's the British MO? Have people on both sides of the fight, create an open wound, and then betray one of them at a particular moment. And then set the dominoes toppling after that. Obama argued for the JCPOA and lied about it, about what he was doing and how he was negotiating it for 5 years. The entire time it was being negotiated. He lied about it, openly lied about it, until he got what he wanted. So I think at a certain level, you could make the argument that the JCPOA was designed to set the Israelis on tilt. Because it didn't really stop the Iranians from enriching. And I know that Netanyahu's been screaming that the Israelis are 5 minutes away from a nuclear weapon for 30 years. I know that. Part of Project Zionism, part of Project this, and all of these things.
Sorry, Tom, you mean the Israelis have been that the Iranians have been
Oh yeah, sorry. The Iranians have been. I'm sorry if I said Israelis. I meant Iranians. I'm sorry. That the Iranians have been pursuing a nuclear weapon. They're 5 minutes away from it for the last 30 years. And you cry wolf enough times, and people stop believing it. And Netanyahu, when it was, designed, when and Israel was the big Zionist project, and it's still the Zionist project, by the way, but it's being betrayed. And the other side of the Zionist project is now Iran. Because if you look at how everybody has responded since Israel took this step, Germany and France and Kaya Kallas and all of them are trying to get involved in the negotiations. The British and the scenario is now starting to look like they want to install Davos's preferred guy in Iran, which is the return of the Shah. Mm-hmm. Iran is now. I just saw something like a couple of hours ago, which said Iran backs Pahlavi coming in. That the Iranian government backs Pahlavi or the IRGC or somebody. Now we got Iranian factions backing this play.
Factions? Which factions, Tom?
I think it was the. Hold on, let me find it.
MI6 controlled factions, I bet.
Yeah. Hold on. Where is it?
Gotta be careful with that.
Iranian supreme leader hands over power of decapitation after decapitation to Iran's military elite to the IRGC. That's part of it. There was something else I saw this morning. And people have been sending me stuff in like 18 different places, and I don't have.
Yeah, there's a lot of psyop. There's a lot of psyop that doesn't make any sense at all. That story's got
right. What I'm getting at here is that this may have been the. Okay, and I'm gonna back up and just let's put the cards on the table. Putin, Trump, Netanyahu, Davos, all these people—they're all mob bosses, right? But but here's the interesting part about mob bosses: is that within the mob, they have a strict code of honor, meaning don't betray. Here's your area of where you get to do this. Here's your area where you get to do this. And as long as you don't betray each other, we're all good, right? If not, it turns into a Scorsese movie, and then there's a lot of blood. Now, in the model I just laid out in theory, because look, JCPOA, then 10-7. You and I have done 100 podcasts together since, or at least 30 podcasts, 40 podcasts together since 10-7. And I've really thought, I've tried to be thoughtful about that scenario. My initial reaction to it, gut level reaction, was that it was an MI6 operation. That was my gut level reaction. MI6. They activated Hamas to attack Israel to get them spiraling towards the end game.
Yes.
I sat there thinking, oh, it could be this one, it could be that one. I wanted to be thorough in my and skeptical in all of my analysis in case of all of these psyops that were out there and all the information. And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stay in the middle. I'm not going to back the Palestinians. I'm not going to back the back the Israelis. I'm going to decry the human loss to what the Israelis are doing, because I can't stand any of that. But at the end of the day, how do you square any of this violence? We all don't want the violence, right? So we always keep everything at the strategic player level, and knowing full well that the people who have set up all of these conflicts don't give a fuck about any of us. They hate people. They'll use whoever they have to. They're allowing Russians to slaughter Ukrainians and Ukrainians to blow up the Moscow Opera House and all this stuff, right? All these horrible things that we've been dealing with. And they love it. They get off on it. Doesn't matter who dies. Israelis die, Iranians die, I don't care. They love it because it's trying to advance their agenda. And their agenda would be get Israel fully on tilt. And then, in effect, portray them as the perfect villain and Iran as the perfect victim.
Sorry, Tom. On tilt. I don't understand that phrase.
On tilt is a poker term for getting a guy acting emotionally at the table.
Right.
Right. Okay. So that he's not playing. If you get a guy on tilt, he'll make bad bets. You make bad bets, you can steal his money from him. That's poker table. Okay. On tilt meaning get him riled up, get him emotional and abreacting, get them crazy and freaking out. And what's Davos been doing to Putin? Attempting to get him on tilt for 3 years. They keep walking up the escalatory ladder, right? So I'm almost. It pains me to say this because I fucking hate Netanyahu, but this might have been the right play. Let him go and do what he always wanted to do. And Trump sits back and goes, "Look, you want to do this? I can't stop it." Because at some point you have to turn to the Iranians and say, because how have the Iranians been negotiating over this nuclear deal. There's a number of ways of looking at this. It could be that Trump and the Iranians had a deal, and then Bibi blew it up by attacking. That's a perfectly rational explanation, right? That he cut a deal that the Israelis couldn't live with. Nuts to Trump, I'm going unilaterally. Of course, we know that Trump doesn't mind that because he wants the Iranians not to have a nuclear weapon. So he set a deadline, 60 days. And on day 61, he said, okay, Bibi, you're going. He also told the Iranians, if in the generous version of this, that, hey, you guys have 60 days. I can't hold him back any longer than this. This is it. And since they negotiate the same way that Zelensky negotiates, which is to not negotiate at all and extend and pretend and everything else, and who does that? Who negotiates like that? This is what starts to really like fucking like. Oh my God! Don't make me have sympathy for Netanyahu, you motherfuckers. But this is where we are because I think they've been playing both sides against the fucking middle, and they're now empowering the neocons to go crazy and scream, see, this is the right thing to do, and like oh my God. All to spiral towards endgame.
And the endgame being
to get Trump involved in a war physically with the Iranians in such a way that he can't get out of it, and to destroy his attempt to remake the United States. Because the goal has always been bond markets, collateral, blah 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 blah, and they don't care how they get there.
Okay.
And the Russians' response so far, just so you understand, the Russians' response so far fits that model. Which is, we don't want the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon either. But we don't, so please come to the table, negotiate. Let's neuter Israel. Now, when I think this all the way through to the end, what I get is, okay, Trump's going to keep sitting back. If the Iranians have any weaponry left, we're finding out right now. Cool. Bomb the crap out of each other.
All right, Tom.
Come to the table.
Just a couple. That's
a shortened version of this. I got a 3-hour version of this rant, Alex, and I don't want to hog the whole thing. But I'm trying to lay the basic framework because I want you to understand, and I'm trying to do this in such a way that it doesn't that it's both maybe the only way through this and unbelievably frustrating all at the same time. Okay.
Yep. And then something that you have said elsewhere, Tom, that I've heard is the Trump and Putin, the grand bargain, as you referred to, is that Iran and Israel, they punch each other out, seriously weaken each other. So Trump and Putin just sit back while they just keep lobbing missiles, destroying each other's country and their strength. Okay, and then that allows the Russians and the Americans to exit from that region without the British coming in, because the British and the Europeans who are backing Iran and Israel, controlling both, have had their proxies
had backed both of them and then betrayed the Israelis in order to get them to attack Iran, and they win, and they win if they can get Trump, and they can blame it all on Trump, which is what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So then, if both lose, and the Europeans and the British, they're out of there. They don't have these major proxies. Now, the thing that I don't get about when you said about the what was it, October the 7th, right? Yes, I can get MI6 behind Hamas because they do perfidy everywhere, right? But that was a false flag. Unless MI6 were also telling Israel not to respond for 7 hours and to drop the security on probably the most secure border in the world.
This is where you gotta want. Yeah, no, exactly. And maybe that's exactly why the Israelis are so goddamn pissed off. Maybe, and again, who are they really pissed off at? I don't know, man. And I don't want to, like, at a certain point, Hamas did kill a lot of people. And there comes a point where maybe that's just that, it's just that simple. And, what Dexter White was saying is maybe this is just revenge for 10/7. I'm like, no, I think it's revenge for being betrayed by the people who they thought were their benefactors. Ooh, that's an even bigger story. I mean, again, I'm happy to be pushed back. Happy to see pushback on this. I'm happy to because it's evolving in real time.
The false flag scenario is not complicated even on October 7 because you had a significant part of the Hamas leadership who were actually living high life in Qatar and who were billionaires flying around on a private jet. Mm-hmm. And what is Qatar in this situation? Qatar is the second cat's paw of the British in that region. Qatar has very extensive intelligence ties with the British, with MI6, with British Foreign Office, to the extent that they even have a military. It's not an alliance, but it's a very extensive partnership. So much so that the Qataris are I think the only country in the world that have two military bases in the UK at their disposal, where they have joint training on British jets, and so Qatar is full of British intel officers. They coordinate action, and then lo and behold, Qatar is financing Hamas and has the core group of Hamas leaders right there in Qatar. So it would have been easy to arrange a false flag in Israel, so that on the one hand, Hamas activates cell in Gaza to launch an attack, and then on the other side, the Israelis arrange that they leave a soft target for the Hamas operatives. So you have to keep in mind that there's two different Hamases. One is, the high life playboys in Qatar, and then you have like the real deal freedom fighters, the Jedis in Gaza. Okay, I think that the real deal freedom fighters in Gaza were the ones who took action and who had no intention of killing any innocent civilians. They had the intention of grabbing as many hostages as possible, because their objective was to exchange them against tens of thousands of Palestinians that were being held indefinitely on no charges, raped and tortured and starved to death in Israeli prisons. Okay, so that was their objective. Civilian casualties happened either by accident or because the Qatar Hamas, somebody was instructed, make sure there's plenty of civilian casualties.
Well, and the Israelis as well.
But then also you have to keep in mind that probably close to half of all the civilian casualties were actually killed by the Israelis. And there's a small detail that emerged from October 7th that to me stinks to high heaven, and it's this one. There was an incident where the Hamas fighters had a group of Israeli hostages in a house, and they got surrounded by the Israeli forces. And there were two survivors from this: one Israeli woman and one supposedly Hamas fighter. So what happened? This Israeli woman gave a testimony, and she said, "Oh, this Hamas fighter who was there with us, he saw that there was no way out, so he changed his clothes, right? And then he and this woman escaped to the other side. Supposedly he surrendered, right? Well, I don't think it works that way. We would have heard of him. We would have heard about him. We would have heard testimonies. He just disappears from the story, which tells me that he was probably working for the Israelis, and probably he was one of the ones whose job it was to make sure that there's plenty civilian casualties. And so after this woman and that supposed Hamas fighter escape, then the Israelis shoot a tank shell into that house, and they kill everybody inside. So that was part of that game. And what I've found in many places throughout history, that the way you get a war going, you create one or two mass casualty events. So what usually happens is, like, let's say you have two peoples living side by side, like we have in Bosnia, Serbs, Croats, and Muslims. And if you go and ask people there today, they will tell you, no way, there's not going to be any war here. Nobody wants to go to war. Nobody wants to hate their neighbors and blah, blah, blah. So what you do is you get a gang of thugs of one side to go to the other people's village, to kill a bunch of innocent people, rape some women, and to make it so that it's very visible, so that the media pick up on it. And usually there's going to be, by chance, some British UN peacekeepers there or British special forces, who merely intended to ensure peace and stability in the region, but somehow they're always there. And then, that's going to create a scandal. And if the war doesn't get going quite yet, you have to kickstart a bit harder. And so then you get a bunch of thugs from the victim side of this first massacre, and you kind of get them to go to the other side and to commit a bigger massacre. And then you have a rapid polarization of the communities. And then, there's no talk about they're killing us. Look what they've done to us. We go to war. It's the jar shaking, red ants and black ants, and then some asshole shakes up the jar. That's what happens. And so what happened on October 7th in Israel was a typical jar shaking exercise where, the idea of picking up hostages to exchange them for Palestinian prisoners would have motivated a lot of those Jedi Hamas people, but the people who orchestrated were the high life playboy from Qatar Hamas people. And obviously, if the thing was coordinated in Israel and it was coordinated in Qatar, obviously there was a node higher up the food chain that coordinated that. And I don't know who that might have been. Might have been the Nigerians or the Japanese, or who knows? The Inuit from Greenland.
Yes, or the Malawis.
We might never know.
They were Maori. Come on, this guy, stop it. They were doing the haka, and they were doing Maori.
Yeah, but it might have been, as crazy as that sounds, it might have been the British and their MI6. So that's as far as the false flag thing goes, and I'm absolutely 100% convinced it was a false flag, because in the immediate aftermath of 7 October, you had at least about half a dozen of testimonies from Israeli soldiers and army veterans and intelligence service veterans who said, no way, no how could this ever have happened by mistake, by accident. It was just, it was like a massively unlikely series of lapses, absent which this attack would never have been possible to execute.
Right.
So obviously it was a false flag attack. Now, my interpretation of the situation in the Middle East is a little bit different than yours, Tom, and maybe it's a little bit simpler as well. I don't think, I wouldn't agree that Iran deserves to be punched in the face, because Iran has done nothing wrong. They are fully within their right to develop their nuclear program. They have a very strong reason to give the region, to make themselves a nuclear threshold state, because their objective is to make the region nuclear free. So they say, okay, if we're going to commit to not having nuclear weapons, which we don't want to have, they've been super explicit about that. They don't want to have nuclear weapons, but we want Israel to get rid of their nuclear stockpile as well.
I agree.
So in that case, they're fully in the right to want to be in that negotiating position. And for the rest of it, for the rest of their program, they're within the international law. So I don't see what's the basis for Trump to allow this, not allow this, to force them to negotiate, to give them 60 days or 90 days or however many days. He's completely... And then let's not forget, the Iranians have been negotiating in good faith with the West for how long? For about forever. 12 years.
I see. I'm not. I see. That's the part of this I don't want to. I can't go with anymore, Alex. I really can't. There's a certain side of this where I understand Iran's position, and I have absolutely no problem with what you just laid out up until that point. I have no problem with. I agree. Israel should be forced in some way to become part of the NPT, to become a normal country like everybody else, along with India and Pakistan, who are also nuclear states that have not signed on to the NPT, and there's somebody else as well. We don't want any more of this. I agree. And I think the Russians want this as well. And I think everybody wants this. But how are you going to get there? And this is, it's like there comes a point where you have to look at who wants the war. And so is Trump saying, look, if this is the way you want to play this is fine, but I can't stop this. Okay.
Yeah, but why doesn't anybody ever exert any pressure on the Israelis?
We are at the point now, even if, yeah, I know, but here's the thing. If the IAEA report is even remotely correct, and the numbers are staggering, how much nuclear fuel the Iranians have at 60% and higher. And one of the things about this is something that became obvious to me recently. I was like, is this 60% uranium and then to 90% fissile material is the easy part. Normally in a chemical reaction, trying to get higher purity gets harder the higher you go up the yield curve, right? And in the organic chemistry process, for example, getting 60% yield in an unoptimized organic synthesis process is easy. I can do it. I mean, that's how we, that's how we passed or failed like organic chemistry 1 laboratory as undergraduates. You got less than 60% on this nylon, this simple nylon reaction, you're an idiot. You don't know how to control temperature. Getting to 90% is the hard part. And that's when the chemical engineers come in and they make the whole thing work better. And then just, and then past a certain point, there's no ROI on going past 90% yield. It's cheaper just to clean it up and send it out the door than it is to try and get to 95%. In nuclear enrichment, beyond 60%, to go from 60 to 90 is the easy part. Getting to 60 is the hard part. So once you're at 60, then Netanyahu's not really lying when he says they can go from here to there very quickly. This is the thing about lies and about propaganda is that every lie has a good nugget of truth in it. So this is the problem.
Tom, so hold on. You do understand strategic requirement for deterrence?
Yes, I do. I agree. I'm not arguing that point.
Israelis have already done all this. The French and the British have given them the technology to have nuclear missiles with which they can completely destroy Iran. Why is Iran not entitled to a deterrence? We have seen what happened to Libya when they gave up their deterrence. We've seen what happened to Syria, to Iraq, you don't have deterrence, you're screwed, you're fucked, and you're done. So do you understand why Iran might want to do that?
Absolutely.
Israel gives up their nuclear. And then take into consideration, Iran has never attacked anybody since 1740s. How many countries have Israel attacked? Israel hasn't stopped attacking everybody in their neighborhood since they came into existence. All they do is killing.
Iran doesn't attack anybody directly. What do you think this axis of resistance is? What do you think
resistance
again?
But if you're a target of a colonial project, are you not entitled to resistance? Do you just sit there and wait for them to come for you? They came for Libya, they came for Syria, they came for Somalia, they came for Sudan.
Why did Putin pull out of Syria? This is important.
Why did Putin pull out of Syria?
He did. He let Syria fall.
I'm asking why.
Oh, it was easy, obviously, because it was his need to be in Syria anymore was unnecessary. I need you to think. This is the problem.
But he's still there. He didn't pull out. He's still there.
He's in Tartus. He's not backing the Assad regime anymore. Okay, why is he not backing Assad? Why is Turkey involved? Why is Turkey in Syria? Why are HTS and Turkey in Syria?
Because Turkey has been cultivating HTS together with MI6 since 2012. And they've been planning to do this ever since their first try between 2011 and 2016 failed, thanks to the Russians. And then they've been putting together al-Nusra and all of those.
So the JCPOA, which was designed from the ground up to allow Europe, which go look at the investment chart of what was put on the table after the JCPOA was put in place. Go look at the money that was put on the table. It's all European money investing in Iran. Every bit of it.
Oh yeah, fine.
Okay. Royal Dutch Shell. This one. That's one. And again, now we're talking about collateral. Okay. Now we're going back to the big. Now we're going back to the big game that you and I have always agreed about, and about what this is about. Again, who's the real colonial power here? Who's going to win? What's their goal? Their goal is to break up the international north-south transport corridor. What have I said what have I said forever? The Russians don't care who's in charge in Iran as long as the INSTC is secured and trade routes are secured. My argument now is that the Iran getting the nuclear bomb is the forever war. That's my argument. That the Israelis, I'm not talking like this is not the Zionists. The Zionists clearly want all of this shit. What I'm arguing now is that this goes away, and then Israel has no goddamn standing left in the world to be able to ask for the same to act the way they have been acting. The axis of resistance is gone. It's been destroyed. Hezbollah stood down on Thursday. The Russians stood down. The Houthis have fired one rocket at Tel Aviv. One.
Okay, Tom, but
I mean, I'm talking these are the facts since we've been here. They're all fit with the Saudis and everybody else around the region have been helping the Israelis defend themselves against Iran. I mean, I understand that there's this, I get some of the old arguments. I get some of the old relationships. I'm not arguing against them. I'm trying to think of a way to understand the frame of the situation as it exists right now, because none of it makes any fucking sense other than what's happening now is ending the permanent open wound, which is Israel versus Iran.
Wait, but Tom,
that's my framework.
If the Iranians say, look, we will commit to never develop a nuclear weapon, and we will limit our uranium enrichment to 3.7%,
sure,
provided that Israel gives up their nuclear weapons,
which is by the way which is exactly what they just put on the table officially about an hour ago.
I know, and it's not the first time, Tom, but
I know it isn't.
Doesn't anybody take them up on that offer? Why doesn't anybody turn to Israel and say, like, hey, Netanyahu, how about it? Let's do this, and then we can have peace in the region. Nobody even thinks about this. It's all about taking down the Iranian regime. That's the end game. Otherwise, you could completely end this whole Saddam has weapons of mass destruction over Iranian weapons of mass destruction if you just accepted Iran's offer and then turn to the Israelis and say, like, look, you guys give up your nuclear weapons and we're done. This problem is solved.
This is why I'm not sold on the generous read on Netanyahu. Okay? Because I think that is exactly the thing. Nobody in Europe, in Davos, wants this to end. They want this conflict, Alex, is what I'm arguing. And what Trump is trying to do is thread the needle between both of these poles. He's got political problems at home that he doesn't have control over his own Senate. He's got a civil war. They're trying to blow up a civil war in LA over ICE. They've got cartels and the fentanyl and all of this shit. You've got multiple attacks on our fucking treasury market in the last 2 months. He's trying to remake the way the world. We're trying to get rid of the British central banking system in the United States by fundamentally changing the money flow, right, to fund the government through tariffs and all of that, as opposed to debt and income taxes. So someone's stoking this conflict. Now, the simple map is that Netanyahu, as a Zionist like Hudnik, has always been on the one side refusing to take Iran's offer up, which tracks with a history, right? On the other side, why is Iran lying about how much they're pushing towards how many hundreds of kilograms of 60% material they have, until the IAEA finally came out and just said, look, this is the way
you're assuming that
IAEA is on Israel's side.
You're assuming that IAEA is telling the truth.
I think for once they actually are. This time. We took their word for it in 2015 about the JCPOA, in 2018 about the JCPOA. We took their word for it. Everybody took their word for it back then. Oh, by the way, the thing that's really pissing me off, and don't get me wrong, I'm not angry with you. I'm like, this is the whole thing. It's like, we're watching an immense IC operation from within the American IC operation going after Tulsi Gabbard, trying to get her out as DNI. because she's actually dismantling these people. They're going after her, which is a clear coup against Trump. And this is all happening at the same time. And the Europeans are acting exactly as you would expect if my argument is correct. They're supporting Iran here when they never supported Iran before. They turned on Israel the minute Israel, before the bodies were even found in 10/7. These were out. These people had already acted their anti-Israeli. They turned on the Israelis.
Supporting Iran.
What's that?
European.
The Europeans are clearly trying to insert themselves into the negotiations. They were behind the JCPOA. Obama worked for them. I always said that
I don't dispute any of that, Tom. I completely agree with that. And I don't dispute Trump being between a rock and a hard place. I don't dispute the fact that this probably needed to happen. What I do dispute is that Iran has done actually anything wrong at all. Like nothing whatsoever. Because if you are Iran, you're at the receiving end of the empire trying to turn you into a colony. So what do you do? And you know, this was absolutely the case about the nuclear weapons. This whole thing, Tom, it's like practically play for play, exactly the same thing as Saddam's weapon of mass destruction. I mean, we've been through the whole thing. We argue endlessly about the mobile biological labs and this and that.
I didn't believe that shit.
The game was always about taking down.
But notice the difference. But notice the shift. Correct. But Alex, notice the shift in American sentiment. Iran can't have a nuclear. If you ask the Americans very specific questions, they give you very specific answers. Can Iran have should Iran get a nuclear weapon? 85% no. Should the United States get involved in a war against Iran to stop them? No. We have shifted. So what I'm getting at is that this is another aspect of that argument I've always made about Davos only has so much time to pull these things off, that their assets in the United States government, that the world is turning against them. They are ratcheting up the pressure, okay, and getting us fighting about and using historical precedent, right, where they bamboozled us in the past when the United States was fully in control by globalist forces back in 2003, when the Rumsfeld-Cheney crowd was lying to the entire world because they still hadn't done their operation in Syria. They still hadn't overthrown Gaddafi, all of that stuff. So what I'm getting at here is that, and this was hard for me. Don't get me, it was easy. I could have easily stayed in the framework you're in right now because it's a very good framework. It's, I think, even 90% accurate. I mean, I truly am like with you on all of that. And I was in that mindset for many, many years. And I think and it's one of the reasons why I became an American dissident, complaining about my country, being willing to be sympathetic to the Russians and the Iranians in their world, and even to a lesser extent the Chinese, which I'm done with that. Okay. But we've never had a moment where Davos is losing control of the control of the United States, and they're on the verge of losing political control of the United States, and the IC, and all of this is all happening. They have to ratchet it up and drive us all crazy. And Israel, this is one of the things, the way I put this the other day, is it was very easy to create the post 10/7 psychological milieu. And give me just 2 minutes. And I think it'll be clear as to where I'm going with this. After World War II, no one was allowed to criticize Israel. They were the perfect victim. Our support of them hollowed out our infrastructure. It hollowed out our moral standing in the world. It hollowed us out as a species, as a country. It took the United States and turned them into just another shitty fucking version of the British Empire, right? And we were even, except that our language is more guttural. We're not quite as stiff upper lip and all that. And that frustration is real. We weren't allowed to talk about, if you named the Jew or you said anything bad about Israel for years, decades, you would be deplatformed, thrown out, removed from polite society and everything else. And then all of a sudden on 10/8, we were allowed to criticize the Jews. All of a sudden, we're watching, Dexter White and I have been watching the surge in real, honest to God, anti-Semitism, right? Some of it is bots, some of it is real. Those guys are not getting deplatformed anymore. All of a sudden, Nick Fuentes has a freaking platform again, and all these people. Dexter himself has, very sophisticated Twitter strategy to monitor these people. He's been doing it for a decade. It's one of his things, and he's like in my ear the entire time. Something's off. Something's changed. This is not right. So Israel went from the perfect victim to the perfect villain practically overnight. The EU and the Democrats. I think we talked about this. I said, watch in 2024. I said, they're setting up this thing with this. They're backing the Palestinians to try and hang Trump with his relationship with Israel. And they're going to run against him on it. I was so immensely surprised they never used it during the campaign. Well, they tried to kill him, and they knew that wouldn't work because at that point, Trump had become, unstoppable, right? But that's why they tried to kill him, because they knew they couldn't stop him on that front anymore. So it was like, okay, here we are with that. And then Israel all of a sudden becomes the perfect villain. And again, I'm not arguing that the Israelis are good, bad, are good here. They're not the good guys. I'm working from that classic story triad of hero, victim, villain. Depending on your point of view and depending on who you are, every player has aspects of that role. And I've been really thinking this through. It's the way I operate about the Fed, right? The Fed is the villain from one perspective. It's the victim from another perspective, and it's possibly the hero from another perspective. I'm just trying to do that now with Israel, which I've never been willing to do before. Okay, and I'm trying to do that honestly, and I'm also doing this with Iran. Okay, so I've always had sympathy for Iran's position, as you so eloquently pointed out. Okay, and and all of your points are well taken, and I've had that position in the past. But now I have to ask the question, whose purpose does this conflict serve, ultimately, in the context of where we are now? Why is somebody trying to push us towards World War III? And we know it's not Donald Trump. So now, what's going on?
I agree entirely.
So now, go back to the modus operandi of the people that we know are the major players here. What did they do to the Turks and the Russians at Gallipoli? What did they do to this one and that one? How did they betray the United States and getting us involved in Vietnam over the USS Liberty? And all these things that we've gone through over the years, right? I really do believe now, in retrospect, especially the more I've dug into how Obama used the JCPOA to do Davos's bidding. Again, as you told me, right? And he lied about it, like openly lied to Congress about it. I read an article from Jack Cashel yesterday about this. I don't agree with his point of view, but his facts and the timeline really line up with everything I've ever thought about Obama and the JCPOA. And I'm like, this is why. But I never quite understood why Trump ended it, unless it was really that the JCPOA was at the same time allow Iran to re-enter the world and continue pursuing a nuclear weapon while saying the entire time that they weren't. Okay? And that's unacceptable. And unfortunately, it was that perspective was then put in the mouth of the amazingly odious Bibi Netanyahu. And if that was a core betrayal by the British of the Israelis, and then they orchestrated 10/7 and killed a whole bunch of fucking Israeli civilians and took hostages and everything else, like at some point, you just have to go, holy shit, they're doing it again. And Davos is lining up. Yeah, and Davos is lining up behind the Iranians. And here's the gig. I also don't think Iran is a monolith. Okay, I think there are many factions within Iran that want to negotiate in good faith. I absolutely believe this. I could even argue that friggin' Khamenei is the guy actually. But what if the IRGC is the one that's actually pulling the strings here? Because if you look at the way the attacks rolled out on Thursday night, what did the Israelis, through all their propaganda, what did they emphasize? We killed the negotiators. That's one that came out, but they targeted all of these IRGC commanders, right? So, and they were attacking military targets. And they did all of that. What if what we're seeing here is the factions within Iran that are at odds with each other, just like we have factions within the United States that are at odds with each other, just like we have factions within Israel that are at odds with each other. There are Zionists and there are Israelis that don't want any of this. What if at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get rid of all of these people that are operating, and we have to out them? It's like we've watched Davos out itself over the last 7 to 10 years that you and I have been doing this together, and showing us to the world who they actually are. What if this is just another one of those moments? And part of what we're reacting to here is our old frameworks and our old understanding of things, and the reality isn't what we thought it was. Again, I always argued that, and I believe for a long time that Iran, look, if the Israelis weren't going to act like a normal country, then Iran is not going to act like a normal country. I get it. I mean, if I were the leadership of Iran and Israel was acting the way they were, yeah, I would do that. But I've heard it from too many people now that the entire region is done with the axis of resistance. They're done with living under the threat of Iran, doing violence in their countries and everything. I've heard enough of this to know that I think everybody's sick and tired of Israel's bullshit, and I think they're tired of Iran's bullshit. Okay? And the Russian response to this has been very clear that they want this over and done with, and they, like Trump, want a negotiated settlement. And because if they didn't, then they would have immediately pledged far more support. They're not standing, and I'll be honest with you, the other thing, when you look at what's happening in Ukraine, is it's clear that Trump and Putin have, in effect, are saying, look, I have to deal with this Iran thing, but you're going to deal with Ukraine. And we're going to neuter all of this shit all at once. You guys are going to get carte blanche to effectively, do what you need to do in Ukraine. And because Trump remember, the Biden pledged aid ends on June 30th. The end of the fiscal year is June 30th. At that point, all the budgeted aid to Ukraine ends. Trump has not re-upped that. It's not coming. I mean, if he backs down on that, we're fucked. And he's a failed president, and I'm going to be like that, and I'm going to be breathing fucking fire and digging a fucking foxhole. But if he holds serve on that, and the Russians keep pushing, that way, because who wants the war? Who wants war at this point? Davos, the European Union. No, I don't want war. I don't want war. You know that.
No, I'm saying London.
I thought you said Tom Luongo. I'm sorry. I'm going.
No.
Sorry. No. Literally, like my left ear is nearly shot, is nearly shot.
So you out, Tom. You're controlled by MI6.
No. Seriously, dudes. I have been. Go look at the ass reaming I'm getting on Twitter right now. The bots are out in such force.
Wow.
They're in such force. It's crazy. As I'm trying to work through this honestly, and I'm being a little bit of a dick about it because it's Twitter and that's my persona on Twitter. But I'm also like, hey man, rethink this through. I'm not saying I don't think I have this completely right, but I think there's something here that we're all missing and we're all being duped. And I don't want. They're using our humanity against us. They're using our strategic abilities against us. I think they're very good at it. I don't know. That's
all right. How about this, Tom?
Yeah.
How about this? A simple explanation. Trump is pro-Zionist. He's doing what he can to support. He's either being captured, he's being threatened, he's compromised, who knows, or he's doing what's really, really his heart's desire. He doesn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons because, I've read stuff about how close he was to his uncle, and he was just like so anti-nuclear, and that in Trump, right? So he doesn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. Israel's already got them. So, okay, fine. As long as Iran doesn't have them, then Israel's not going to use them. And if Iran is weakened, then Israel doesn't need to use them. And he's supporting and empowering Israel to defeat Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, and now Iran. And then we can have the Greater Israel Project.
Well, I think that's, I'm telling you, I think the Greater Israel Project is dead. If you want my honest opinion,
I do. Please, why? I think they've got more. They're getting rid of Palestinians in West Bank. They're destroying Gaza and making that prison smaller, and then shooting them like fish in a barrel.
I know. It makes me so dirty to even think about this is the only way to deal with this fucking problem. Like you have no idea how hard this is for me. I have no idea. You really don't have.
No, I'm clear. Listen, I'm really clear about we all have the same sympathies. We're all anti-war. We don't want anyone suffering, whether they're Jews or Muslims or Christians or whatever, right? We don't want conflict. But human beings, just look at what Pol Pot did in Cambodia to his own people. Human beings have an incredible propensity for cruelty to their own. If they'll do that to their own,
it's
then
a feral world. That's the problem. And at some point, what I thought about this the other night, and I meant this as I got to the end of it. I'm like, in order to dare peace, you might have to threaten war. And get everybody to the point where they go, holy fucking shit, is this what we're going to do?
it's just such a dangerous game.
But you destroy Davos and you destroy the old Israeli project.
Now that's the thing that doesn't square, right? With Trump supporting Israel, because he is in all other arenas, and from listening,
or is he trying to allow for Israel to survive, but it's not the Israel we've always known. I've always argued this, that the way out of this is to allow an Iran that is not pursuing this axis of resistance strategy, and an Israel that isn't forcing. They're each forced into the conflict with each other. They're being forced into this ant shake, right? To use Alex's metaphor, right? And it's been building for 50 years, and it doesn't. And I'm in effect, I'm almost asking people, all of the shit that we've dealt with up until 2015 in the JCPOA is important because it frames the background. But I think the story changed 10 years ago. And I didn't start seeing that until the other day. And in times I will cop to not having seen it, but I was around it. I was near it, but my own biases blinded me to it. And I'm not, again, this is not an endorsement of Israel, but frame it all from that perspective. And then know that there are plenty of people in Israel that don't want any of this either.
Yeah, about 15% of them.
Well, I mean, but again, they've been propagandized after. They were propagandized about what happened on 10/7, like any more than we were propagandized after 9/11. Alex, okay, I was run out of gun shops in North Florida for being a libertarian after 9/11. Okay, that's how fucking crazy people were. You lived through, the civil wars in Yugoslavia. You know how this is. And people lose their minds after an event like that, and they don't care.
Okay, so
and that's you know what I mean. But bombs dropping on Tel Aviv gets everybody's fucking attention. It's like, I want the Iranians to punch Israel in the mouth really fucking hard, because that's the only way we're going to get to the other side of this.
Okay, but what about Trump?
And I was a little worried, and I've been very worried that Iran's response has been so weak.
Okay.
Just it has been.
Okay, but now, Tom, Alex, just to make it clear, right? I just reiterate, we're all of the same view. We don't want people dying. We're anti-war, right? And anti-colonialism. And Tom, I'm not disagreeing with you, right? I'm curious. Let me look through the lens because you've got a pretty good track record. But what about all of his posts on Truth Social? Iran has to surrender. We got control of the skies.
May I?
Please.
Yeah, please go.
It's at this point, it's important to ignore this. Rich, this is all psyops. Trump is the world champion of psyop. It's best to just ignore it. But I think that I'll take a jab of trying to work out the whole situation. And I think it makes perfect sense, not only for the events of today, but it has a consistency going back centuries. Okay? So we know already that we're looking at a conflict between the global empire and the whole rest of the world, essentially, which is why the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East is basically the same thing. In the Middle East, when the Soviet Union collapsed, you had the end of the Cold War. Everybody was, oh, well, shit, how do we position ourselves? The British made a conscious, deliberate decisions that they will not become like a neutral island nations minding their own business, that they will try to reassert themselves. As Douglas Hurd, the foreign minister under John Major, said, we're going to punch above our weight and we're going to maintain that position. And we're in a good position to become a major global player again. They express the ambition to reestablish their hegemony east of Suez. So they're looking at the whole region there. Remember, Israel is their colonial project. It serves the purpose of destabilizing the whole region there. So they're always at war at everybody else. They're always picking a fight. Oh, we have to take down Bashar al-Assad because dangerous maniac, blah, blah, blah. Oh, Saddam Hussein is very dangerous. We have to take down Saddam Hussein. And the West obediently does the work for him. Oh, Iranians, the nuclear weapons. And so now we're discussing Iranian nuclear weapons. The whole thing from start to finish is a colonial project. And the one of the main, the end game for the Middle East is Iran. And they've been saying, you have to go to Iran. But to go to Iran, you have to go through Damascus, right? You have to take down Bashar al-Assad, and then you can go to Iran, right? And so lo and behold, the British and the Turks take down Bashar al-Assad. And then 6 months later, suddenly the Iranian nuclear program becomes an urgent matter, and it's all going in that direction. And it's the whole point of that game is to take them down, to regime change them, and then the whole region becomes a colony of the UK, primarily UK and France, exactly the same ones that partitioned the area under Sykes-Picot, which was slipping away from them, so they decided on this. Okay, and so I understand why Trump backed out of the JCPOA, because he looked at the deal and he was like, what the hell? We clean this up, we negotiate, we police it, and these European degenerates take the spoils? No deal. So that's understandable. But from the Iranian point of view, you're negotiating with the Western Empire. You're not differentiating, like, oh, Trump is a Republican and he wants to return the United States to its Republican tradition, but Obama is a globalist. As far as they're concerned, they're negotiating with the United States. And that means that being disarmed, having no deterrent, and showing all their cards, they're making themselves vulnerable. So from their point of view, resisting and making themselves a hard nut to crack makes complete and total and perfect sense. And they're entitled to it. And anybody reasonable, if they understood the issues, would say Iran is fully in the right to be doing what they're doing. Israel is not there a player, oh, Israel bad, Iran bad. No, Israel is there the beachhead of the Western Empire that wants to simply colonize the whole region. Now, if you lose the resistance and they just say like, okay, we're just going to let ourselves at the mercy of, these European colonial powers, what does that mean? You become Congo, you become Angola, you become Niger, Burkina Faso, you become like India under the British rule. Let me just give you a real taste of what that actually means. So, India was under the British rule from 1757 until 1947, correct? About 200 years. In those 200 years, India suffered 31 or 33 major famines, okay, in 200 years. Up to 160 million dead. Before the British rule in India, for over 2,000 years, only 16 famines were recorded, okay? And since the British left India, not even a single one. So, I know that correlation isn't causation, but this is what you're up against if you eliminate resistance. And what I get from the region, from the people that I'm in touch with from there, they're not tired of the resistance. They want Israel gone. They want Western powers gone, United States included. They are supportive of the resistance. They mourn the defeat of Hezbollah. They are collectively rooting and cheering for Ansar Allah in Yemen, for the Iranians, for Iranian proxies, and for Hamas. They regard them as Jedis. They want to resist. They want the Western power the hell out of there. So it's not that complicated. And they don't differentiate between the United States and Europeans. I mean, we see the difference. But as far as they're concerned, is the evil empire, and the evil empire is there as a predator, finding pretext, burrowing their way in, infiltrating, co-opting, sending spies, sending special forces, funding these separatist movement, these MEK type alternative, and killing their people. Iran is not attacking anybody. Iran is not conditioning whether the UK can have nuclear weapons, whether the United States can have a nuclear program. They're not minding anybody else's but their business. But they are constantly on the defensive because, and then, we have 1996 clean break doctrine, and everything's playing out exactly in accordance with the clean break doctrine, right? And it was drafted by US neocons, right? So as far as Iranians are concerned, the United States is not a friend. And so they have to be on defensive.
Of course.
And so Iran is in the right to defend themselves, because maybe they will become like the Congolese. They're going to become slaves to the Western Empire. And maybe they're going to be depopulated with periodic famines. And we in the West are going to sit here and say, like, these people are so corrupt. Look, they can't even get their agriculture in order. They probably deserve to all die because look how inferior they're. Typical colonialist behavior.
Yep.
And the Brits and the French are dead set on regaining their colonial dominance over the Middle East, over Africa, over South Asia. They want Russia, they want Ukraine, they want Eastern Europe, they want South America, all of it.
Yep.
And so that is, the nuclear program in Iran and all the brouhaha about it, that is just a way to find pretext, to trap the Iranians in doing something bad, to say, like, oh, look, you bad Iranians, you have not showed us your this or that. You've filled out.
I know, of course. Alex, I'm in no way, manner, shape, or form am I disagreeing with any of that. I get all of it. I still believe all of that is true. I know what these fucking neocons will do. I know they all work. I mean, like, if I look at fucking Mark Levin and all these people, I know what they are. They're odious. I get it. I'm not in no way, manner, shape, or form am I arguing that point. What I'm saying now is these people are playing both sides. This is what I'm saying. These same fucking people, the British and the French, are playing both sides. And they're encouraging Iran to pursue a policy that they know they're doing it again, man. They're doing it to us again. This is, look, you want to invoke Star Wars? I'll invoke Star Wars for you. How did Emperor Palpatine take over the world?
I don't.
He backed both the separatists and undermined the Jedi all at the same time. He got the Jedi to fight a fucking war and turn themselves into the peacekeepers to turn themselves into generals and corrupt the Jedi code. Meanwhile, the entire time he was behind the whole separatist movement. As odious as the fucking performances and the dialogue in those movies are, like, dude, this is explicitly clear. Like, go read a grok summary of the plot of the prequel films, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You're absolutely right to invoke it here. Davos is Emperor Palpatine, and they don't give a shit, and they'll use the Iranians and the right to defend themselves, and they'll use the Israelis' belief to defend. They have the right to defend themselves, and they'll control the people near the top to pursue policy that will ensure conflict. That's what I'm arguing. And all you got to do to ensure conflict is betray one of them and get the other one to go. And the Israelis are the perfect fucking scapegoat because they've been so goddamn odious up until this point. They're the perfect fucking fall guy. I mean, that's what I've been getting at. And that's what I'm saying here. And what if Trump sees through all of that and Putin sees through all of that? And if you look at the way they've been acting, it's so very obvious that they get it. That's why Putin is trying to. That's why Trump wants to stop the war. He's got people around him who want to stop the war in both places. He's got He's beset on all sides by traitors within the IC, the State Department, this one, that one, everything else. And like, man, and he's got a thin coalition, a thin majority in his legislature who gave him that.
No.
They stole 40 fucking House seats, man. They stole 6 Senate seats.
I completely get all that, Tom, and I don't disagree. And I'll go even a step further if you want, because you know what, I understand the position that Trump is in. I understand that maybe he's playing this to the best of his ability, that he wants to stop the war, that he wants to eliminate the causes of conflict there, and that he's probably, well, obviously he's negotiating with the Iranians. He's probably coordinating action with Vladimir Putin, probably with the Chinese as well, either through Vladimir Putin or directly. And I would say also, you know, there's something very mysterious happened last week. We found out that the Iranians obtained all these terabytes of detailed information about the Israeli nuclear program. And I thought, okay, so maybe the Iranians are really, really capable with their intelligence work, or maybe Trump's people said, look, it's going to get really ugly here. Please don't take the rhetoric too hard. It's just going to sound awful. Here's a little gesture of goodwill. And then they hand them the disk, you know, the data. So the Iranians understand, okay, Trump's not our enemy, but there's a game being played, and we're going to play along. So what? Yesterday they sent two aircraft of their officials to Oman, and then they again negotiated and discussed, I don't know what exactly, but they discussed things with Steve Witkoff. Where I would push back is I can't see Israel as a fall guy. Israel is strictly British Empire's beachhead in the Middle East, there to keep the region destabilized perpetually and doing their job to a T. Absolutely perfectly.
It is Occam's razor, Alex. It is Occam's razor.
And then
it is.
I think that
no argument.
On the other hand, the Iranians, they don't need inducement by anybody from the outside to do what they do, because I think that their strategy and their positioning is perfectly consistent with their own priorities. You know, they need to defend their regime. They need to not become a colony of the Western Empire. And the same was true for Bashar al-Assad. And, you know, it was necessary to take down his regime. He wasn't open to, you know, being played on both sides, so they play him a little bit. You know, they tried to play him by saying, like, hey, you know, Qatar gas through Syria to Israel and Turkey, how about it? And we run it and it's our show. And he said no. And that's when they said, like, okay, that's the end of him.
Right. My again, what I've been, you know, again, there's a part of this this story, especially about Syria, as I said earlier, you know, that I can see the Turks under Erdogan being given control over Syria, okay, in order to thwart Greater Israel. Okay. What I see. But at the same time, can also see Erdogan saying, yeah, you know what? And deal with Iran as well. Okay. I think that, and I'm making a very cynical read on this. And I know I'm making a very cynical read on this, because this may be the best we can get out of this. Okay. The Russians' perspective on this has been very weird. And the other thing that has altered my perception on this in the last week was just how good Israeli execution of the initial attack was. Like, it became like Dexter and I sat there on Friday or Saturday. I was at a Bitcoin conference in Tampa last weekend, so I don't remember quite when I had this conversation with him. I think it was late Friday afternoon. And he said to me, he's like, look, Iran has to, like, take out Israel's you know, air fueling capabilities, their ammo dumps, their fuel dumps, and everything else if they want to have a chance here. Otherwise, they're in serious trouble. Like, then we've all been shocked by how little, in effect, the response has been. Now, war's not over yet. I think it. But what I keep saying is they shot 100 missiles on Friday night, or Thursday, Friday, and then they shot 20 or 50, and then they shot 20, and then last night they shot 5. Like how many? And it even doesn't matter how many missiles they have. If they don't have any launchers, if the launchers have been taken out, they can only, it's having 20,000 rounds of ammo and only 5 guns. That's unfortunately what it feels like. I'd be wrong. They might have a lot more. Okay, I don't know. I had this conversation with, like I say, I was having that kind of conversation with Larry Johnson, and it's very, to me, this looks like a classic Davosian tactic to attempt to attack, to take Trump off the board so they can do the big friggin' colonialist purge. That's what I think is the ultimate target here. And
yes,
and I would love nothing more than to see Iran give up their nuclear program and Israel to be forced to give up theirs as well. That's what I mean when I say the grand bargain in the Middle East, with the Russians and the Americans being the guarantors that that's not going to happen, and that the British and the French, and then the way you keep the British and the French from coming back into the region is, of course, you bankrupt them at home, and then you take the war financial. That's been my framework for years, and the big question is, in everybody's mind, is what deals did the Iranians make in their pursuit of their defensive strategy that doesn't paint them in the perfect victim light. I am not here to make any statements about that. What I'm here to do is to very dispassionately look back and go, anybody who's trying to tell me that you're the perfect victim and you're the perfect villain, you're the perfect hero, fuck you. It's all gray. You're all mob bosses. No, sorry, not buying it. That's the world that's the position I'm taking, because that one most likely has the most truth in it. That one may be more of a victim than the other, and one may be more of a villain than the other, but no one's, you know what I mean? Like, that's the way I look at it, man.
I don't look at it that way, Tom, because
I know you don't. That's fair.
The British and the Europeans have been slaughtering and depopulating people around the world for more than 2 centuries.
Those are the only perfect villains in the story.
For more than 5 centuries.
I know.
Iranians haven't attacked anybody in 300 years. They're not the same. The Russians never colonized anywhere.
I never said that, Alex. I never said.
I know, but they're not the same. So it's not all gray. There's really something black on the side of the people who are the sponsors of the Israeli state.
Okay, fair. That's you and I are yeah. No, I'm talking about the actual people who are in the fight. The Americans, the Russians, the Israelis, and the Iranians. I'm not talking about the one shaking the fucking jar. We know those fucking people are evil.
Oh well, yeah, but I think that's the only thing that's relevant. The fact that the red ants and the black ants are being nasty to one another, that's downstream from these people shaking the jar.
Yes.
So,
yes. No. Yes. Yeah. All I'm trying to do is put a finer picture on it in order to lead us to good outcomes. Because right now everybody's like throwing their weight, going, Trump's a fucking Zionist and he's betraying MAGA and he's doing this. I'm like, fuck off. And on the other side, I just don't want anybody to be confused about this. There are plenty of Iranians who don't want a nuclear weapon. I think there's plenty of Iranians in power who don't want a nuclear weapon. I also think there are plenty of Israelis who don't want what Netanyahu's doing.
Well,
but you look at the situation, and I want Iran to survive. And I'll be honest with you. Here's a very interesting point.
What do you mean you want Iran to survive? They've been there for 5,000 years.
I don't want them.
Alex, I think.
Wait, stop. What I'm saying is this. Again. What I'm saying is this. Oh God, what was I trying to say? Oh, fuck me. Like, I didn't mean it that way. That's what I meant. Like, I don't want anybody wiped off the face of the fucking planet. I want Iran to come into the world. What I was about to say is this. One of the things that was an interesting tell, and something that was lost in all of this, as much as I fucking hate this guy, Netanyahu's initial statement after the attack. Did you watch it?
After which attack?
The first attack on Thursday. When Netanyahu from Greece or the fucking plane.
Israel
attacking Iran.
Yeah, okay.
On Thursday night, a week ago Thursday. Did you watch it?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, I watched it, and I noticed something that wasn't ever there before, which is Netanyahu actually saying to the Iranian people, look, you can be a great people, blah, 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 blah. He was actually offering a fig leaf to the Iranian people as opposed to his normal, they're evil, they're this, that. And that tells me that someone's holding his strings. And I think those strings are being held by Trump. I think Trump has given him just enough leash to go do what Trump wants him to do so that we can get to the next phase of this. That's what I think. And because Netanyahu never, ever said that before. Ever. And I can be, and the cynical way on that can be that he's just
what I heard in that speech is he's trying to butter up the great, proud Iranian people to overthrow the regime.
I know. That is the uncynical beat.
Same strategy of regime changes. Nothing to do with nuclear this or that. All that is bullshit. The end goal is regime change, and they want to arouse the Iranian people to overthrow their regime. So I heard nothing good in his speech, even remotely. It's like zero credit from me.
I'm looking for the hope, dude. Like, cause you're right. I'm serious. I'm looking. Yeah, I know. I'm looking for hope that someone has actually got him on a leash. And look. I'm throwing it out there.
Somebody's got him on the leash. That's for sure. But I would.
The question is whether it's Trump.
I would look to Sir Richard Moore. I would look to the MI6. I would look to the permanent undersecretary of the undersecretary of the Foreign Office. I would look to the Bank of England. That's where I would look to. And 100%, they have him on the leash. But they are satanic, degenerate, genocidal maniacs. So whatever they say, even if it sounds nice and fluffy, I don't trust it. If they tell me that fluffy bunny rabbits are nice, I would not trust them.
Alex, what I'm asking you to do, and I know this is going to be very, I know you're resisting this, and that's fine, which is that may not actually be completely true here. That the game itself has actually turned enough that Netanyahu.
I know what you're saying, and I agree. I know what you're saying, and I agree.
That's all I'm saying.
The game has changed. I'm just talking about the game of the last
500 years.
No, with respect to Israel, let's call it 100. Let's call it 100.
Yeah, I agree. What I'm saying is
declaration starts even before that, but let's call it.
I'm not calling. What I'm about to say is going to sound like, oh, it's psyop, it's 4D chess. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is this: is that if in the existential moment, Israel has to choose sides after they've been betrayed by the people who put them in the position that they're in, that even a guy like Netanyahu, at that moment, may have to say, you know what, I can't. Davos is weak. All of their promises don't matter. And if they betrayed Israel, their project, right, in order to start this process where we are today, then I can see a master psychopath politician like Netanyahu throwing him with Trump. And the proof of that argument, and we don't have that proof yet. And I'm not saying that that argument is correct. I'm not saying anything. What I'm saying is the proof of that argument is if we do not see him push for regime change along with Trump, and if everybody else pushes for regime change, the Shah's son, Pahlavi, coming, or grandson coming, who they're out there parading in front of us every day, and they were in our space the other night telling us this is the guy everybody wants. I saw it, and then I heard, and then I had like 15 fucking people come out of the woodwork and that guy is clearly for them. Like, this is, I mean, so I'm watching this and I'm like, I'm wondering.
Yeah, here's how I see it, Tom.
I think we might be both right in the end.
The United States is the blunt force in this world. They are the provider of weapons, security guarantees, aircraft, bombs, all of these things. So,
of course,
to that extent, the United States holds the strings, and and Netanyahu obviously has to respond to Trump. But Netanyahu is, you know how we said that this is the same conflict as in Ukraine? Mm-hmm. Same thing. Zelensky needs Trump. for bombs and aircraft and military support and intelligence support and ammunitions and all of this. But you notice Zelensky has been antagonizing Trump since the start because he already signed over the family silverware of Ukraine to the Brits. Same thing in the Middle East. They still want Trump to be the blunt force, to kick everybody's ass and make them submit, but they want all of the wealth of the Middle East to go to the degenerate, retarded, hereditary, oligarchic families of Europe and Great Britain.
Agreed.
So obviously this is where the story breaks, but Netanyahu still needs the weapons and the protection from the United States, which is why you have ultimately actually the real rift, which is between the United States and Europe. And to my mind, Davos is nothing but a debating society produced and orchestrated by the City of London. And you can see, like this last Davos, you can go and you can see the interview between Tony Blair and al-Shibani, I think, the foreign minister of Syria, which is one of the guys that they, he went from being a founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria to being the foreign minister. They made it look nice. They put a suit on him. And then Tony Blair interviews him at Davos. But who is Tony Blair? Tony Blair has been in charge of the whole thing from the time he was the prime minister. And he's still in charge of the whole thing, because all these terrorists have been transformed from being terrorists to being like politician now by Tony Blair's former chief of staff, Jonathan Powell. And Jonathan Powell then puts them in 9 suits, trains them what to say and how to say it, and then sends them to Davos, where Tony Blair interviews them. And then, they come across as these really nice, soft-spoken, kindly guys, completely devoted to democracy and human rights, talk about empowering women. Yeah, exactly. And then, once the show is over, the lights are out and they go back to their business. Then they conduct a mass slaughter of Alawites across Syria. Same shit. But that string of events tells you that it's the City of London that's doing it, and that Tony Blair is the equestrian in charge of that project. They need Trump. They need the United States for the aircraft, for the satellites, for the bombs, for the missiles, for the anti-aircraft defense, and all this. But the whole intelligence work, the secret diplomacy, the dirty games with financing terrorists and getting them to slaughter a whole bunch of people there, that's all coming out of London.
Oh, I know.
In Ukraine, same shit in the Middle East. Exactly.
Agreed. Agreed. 100%, Alex. Yeah. Agreed. I know you're not ever getting any argument at me about that. But again, I'm going to continue to pursue a slightly new tact, not because it has to be considered, because the game is changing, and the rules are changing, and the relationships are changing. And it may just be that all we're seeing here is the flowering of all the things that you and I have been talking about. The growing, relationship between Trump and Putin, and the change of the world from the center being Europe to the center of the world being the Pacific Ocean, and yada, yada, yada. And then along the way, in order to get that, unfortunately, the native populations have to actually pay in blood. And that's unfortunately the way humans are wired. And we all wish this just ends with no bloodshed. We all wish that it ends but it doesn't. Because until Davos, and Davos is a metaphor. I think Evil Corp Central is the better way of looking at it. You know what I mean? Pick a new term. I don't really care. But Davos was a good term in 2017. Today, maybe Evil Corp Central is better. Because it's more, it's less geographic. But you look at what's happening. Everybody who wants the war is north of the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean states are all being, are all being fortified by Trump and attacked by Europe, while we now have this thing touch off. And all I'm saying, all I've been trying to elucidate here is that it could easily be that there are factions in Iran's political and military hierarchy that are also working for these fucking people. And that's what I've been saying. And that they're betraying their own people as well as everybody else. And that's a harder narrative to accept, but it may actually be true. And it may be.
Yes,
and because it actually furthers their fucking evil goddamn plans. Only reason I would even consider it, man. Only reason.
You will have a fifth column in Russia. You'll have a fifth column in Iran. You'll have a fifth column in China. Obviously, that exists. But in those regimes, you have Vladimir Putin on top, who defines policy. You have Ali Khamenei on top, who defines policy. You have Xi Jinping on top, who defines policy. Not by themselves in isolation. They have their their cabinet. They have their boards of advisors for this and for that. Obviously, But then they're at the top of the pyramid. You form a consensus. This is the strategy. This is what we're pursuing. This is what we're doing. The fact that the fifth column is there doesn't have the same impact as it does in our democracies, where we're all over the place, right? And we have no idea who's in charge because it's that way by design. And then, I'll also take exception to that we're wired this way. I don't think we're necessarily wired this way. Since 1946 until now, 80% of all wars in the United States in the world have been initiated by the United States, right? Same period, the UK has been engaged in at least 80, 83, 84, 85 military conflicts around the world. You take those two out, and the United States has taken this role only because it has been infiltrated and co-opted by the British Empire, right?
Agreed.
If you take that element out, if you manage to quarantine the empire, the British action in the world, I bet you 90% of all the problems in the world would just dissipate, be gone, and then people would be solving mutual conflicts in a completely different way. They said well, shit, this is mine. No, it's mine. Okay, well, let's have it. Nobody wants to go to war.
You can see the way that Trump has set up the Middle East. That he did more when he went to the Middle East and set up all those deals in 10 days that have been done in 10 years. It's very clear that that's and it's the same thing. Like SPEIF is SPEIF, the St. Petersburg Economic International Forum, is going on next week. As a matter of fact, I've had to blow off Sputnik. They've been asking me for an interview to talk about that, and I look at SPEIF as one of those things every year that is a node of potential stability because it's going to stitch people together through economics and trade. I believe in all of that. I know Trump believes in all that. It's very obvious that he believes in all of that. I'm at, but this is where I am, and I think that, and I'll be honest with you, I think that there are a lot of Israelis that would like the exact same thing for their country. I do. I don't think that the Israeli people are any more or less, as a people, evil or bloodthirsty or anything else. There's a cartoon version of that. There's a cartoon American in the world, and there's a cartoon Russian in the world, and there's a cartoon the British people are getting fucked left and right. The English people, sorry, not British, the English people, the Scots, the Irish, they're all getting fucked by what they're doing over 10 Downing Street.
Absolutely.
Same thing with the French. Same thing with the French people and the Germans and everybody else. They're all being played. They're all being whipped up. What I mean by we're wired is that we're wired to respond to an aggression against us and an attack on our homeland. So I don't, and they never have blame the Iranians for many of the things that they've done in their strategy. I am beginning to question whether or not Khamenei at the top of Iranian society has as good a control over his pyramid as the other people you mentioned. Because clearly Netanyahu doesn't have that level of control over Israel. Likud can get at best 25 to 30%, but at the same time, the Israeli people understand that in order for them to survive, they have to make the Faustian bargain to put him in power because he's the only one who can actually, do the things necessary to deal with what they perceive as the threats to their existence. And that's it. And I know that Israel itself is a pawn in the game. I get it. I'm not arguing that point. I'm just trying to add a little bit of nuance to all of this because it's in that 5% of nuance or 10% nuance that we haven't been talking about. That I think that's where all of this, where the fulcra are to get us out the other side. It's a needle that we have to thread. That's all I'm arguing. Otherwise, you and I completely agree.
I think that we almost completely agree. I think we're very close to completely agreeing. I just, I think that the whole story starts with European colonialism. Iranians never asked for that, and it's there at their doorstep. So, if they do this or that questionable vis-a-vis the colonialists, well, they've been provoked into that situation. Like imagine if somebody came to the border of the United States and then started. Well, actually, you don't have to imagine it. That's actually happening.
It is happening.
And so now you could tear Trump apart because he's sending these people back who have lived there and who are now part of the American system, and they lived there for so many years. Well, hey, look, you came there illegally. What the hell? What are we supposed to do? Not enforce our laws? So you could always take somebody and then pick them apart because something they've done is maybe questionable, or maybe it's abrasive or rough or nasty, but they've been put into that situation. If you didn't have all these illegals forcing their way, because George Soros gave them around these brochures, you're going to get a job and a house and a car and everything's going to be amazing for you. If that didn't happen, the United States wouldn't have to do any of this shit that they're forced to do now. Same thing for Iran. If they were not being besieged by the empire nonstop, they wouldn't have to do a lot of the things that they're doing, which we might say like, hey, that was very nice.
No, I agreed, and I'm just saying that I think we, at a certain level, need to understand that is part of the Israeli zeitgeist as well. Oh, look, and I know that's hard. I know that's hard.
Israelis are for me, 85% of them or something pretty much want the Palestinians gone, right? I think, okay, just to be clear about this, I don't think that's a Jewish thing, because if you read the history of settler colonialism, it's always the same shit. It's extremely cruel. It's extremely bloody and atrocious. The French in Algeria and other African countries, the British in China, in India, and across Africa, the Germans in Africa, the Belgians in the Congo, the Spaniards in South America, the Japanese,
the Americans across the native populations in the West.
Yeah, it's no one. Shit. So this is nothing to do with Jews, but I think that at present, the Israeli Jews are under a thick barrage of mass formation psychosis, which is being deliberately induced and forced on them. And, they are those really, really shitty, nasty red ants right now, which means that, on one hand, you can understand them, but I mean, none of it was meant to happen. And it's been that way since 1948. And, I'll just throw this in there. So I have a friend whose family was in Auschwitz or Treblinka, one of these places. And then when they got liberated, when the Soviets let them out of the camps, they were not exactly let out of the camps. They were transferred to a different camp under the control of the who? Nigerians? The Inuit?
Maori?
The British, as it happens. And so he told me that, my family, they wanted to go to the United States. They wanted to go to Canada or Australia. They wanted to go. Nobody wanted to go to the Middle East. So the British held them there, and they were let go on condition that they go to the Middle East. They were kind of coerced to go to the Middle East because they had the agenda of seeding that region with the Jewish race to create Israel in order to cement their hegemony of the Middle East. So So now, if Hamas do something bad because they are resisting the occupation, well, shit, that's way downstream from the British gross interference in the region's policy and ethnic makeup and social makeup and all of those things. Anyway, I'm done. It's
I'm with you on all of that, Alex. And putting that on the table is absolutely absolutely fair. It's absolutely fair. Okay. So no, never think otherwise. I am when I present the challenges like this, I'm doing so from a purely strategic and unemotional perspective. And I hate to have to do it, and I hate to have to be the guy that puts that on the table. Okay, sometimes, but that's what I'm seeing. And their goal is to always make us all dirty.
Yeah.
Their goal is to make everybody dirty. They want to turn Trump into the fucking villain. You either die a hero or you live just long enough to be a villain, right? Dark Knight, like it's a profound statement, but at the same time, another profound statement, and I will reiterate what I said up at Cornerstone. Your focus determines your reality, and so be aware of that. Shift your focus, test your hypotheses, test your understanding and your knowledge, question yourself and what your own bias is, and then ask yourself, does it all still fit? And since we're all working with imperfect information under multiple layers of fucking psychological operations intended to drive us all insane, the only way you remain sane is to constantly do that. And it's exhausting, and we're going to get stuff wrong, and we're going to get stuff right.
Yeah, of course.
And, like I said at the top of the show, I wish I had gone with my initial instinct on 10/7 and said it was a fucking MI6 operation, and then look to see, and then, because if I had done that, I would have gone all the way downstream, and I would have gone, and 18 months from now, the Europeans are going to turn to Iran as their saviors, and Israel is going to. I could see this all play out that way from that perspective. Once I did that, and I stopped fucking around and listened to my hindbrain, which told me this is what was going on. And so I'm willing to cop to that as well. And I could have actually prepped. This wouldn't feel like such a whiplash coming from me.
Yep.
Because I would have been prepping this for a long time. And so, fair cop, man. We all get it a little wrong. I know, Rich, you need to go. So let's just
end it here. I just want to say, I canceled the other appointment, right? I just want to say,
okay.
But it is coming up to the 2-hour mark. Right?
Of course.
There's no stopping you, Tom, when you get going, right? You just...
I'm so sorry.
Let's talk about football or women or something.
Dude, I want to make.
We got to repeat Stanley Cup.
Oh no,
champion.
we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. I'm sorry. That's just beyond the pale. I do want to say this, like at a fractal level. My job as a social worker is look and see what's going on in the household, and I find things that are unpleasant. Doesn't mean I like it or agree with it, but I got to work out what's the motivation between the different players and who's going to get hurt and why. Doesn't in any way mean that I agree with it or like what's going on. And that's what I hear in what you're saying, Tom. And maybe
we're dealing with family system stuff that goes back 500 years.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
1,000 years.
Maybe you're partially right. Time will tell. And all there is for us to do is to keep standing for peace. If you're in the UK, bit.ly/makewarhistory. There is a little story with that, with HMRC wrote to me and they said they're going to take the money from my salary, they're going to change my tax code. And I wrote back to them and I said, no, you're not. You can't do that. Bill of Rights, the law of due process, which is derived from the Magna Carta, International Criminal Court Act, the Recognition of Trusts Act, the Terrorism Act. Your administrative processes don't get to overrule those laws and statutes. Go away. So see what happens now. So bit.ly/makewarhistory. All right, go check that out if you're in the UK so we can make war history and then spend our money on more useful things rather than the killing of other people in foreign lands.
Yes, and if I may, what Rich just said is a deadly serious and very important initiative. It's not a gimmick.
No. And
so if somebody thought it was a gimmick, no, really go check it out.
Thank you.
And one last point on what Rich just said. The path to what I am arguing here is what everybody's arguing. Wouldn't it be a nicer world if we didn't all have to spend all our time and energy and effort, be it Iranian, Israeli, American, or anybody else, spending all this money and all this money and time and energy and effort on making fucking weapons of war, as opposed to making things that are productive. So we've got all this technology. We've got all this lovely technology that these endless conflicts have created. Let's now put them to productive civilian use, and I want my fucking flying cars.
Fabulous. Okay,
The Chinese are building them.
I know they are.
links in the description below for Tom and Alex. Go check them out. Follow them on X, and look forward to seeing you all again in a few weeks. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys. This was all fire and brimstone.
It had to be.
It was quite heated. It was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Good weekend. Bye.
Is this you? Low energy, low libido, no get up and go? Boost your testosterone naturally and rev up your engine with Immense Boost. bit.ly/CryptoRichBoost and order your testosterone boost today.